Okay, welcome to the last session of today, Money Talks. When I met with Sylvia about this, we talked about the whole nature of investment and funding and how studios get themselves to be sustainable and economically viable. And that led us on to select a panel that we felt reflected all possible points of view and all possible kind of scenarios. So we're going to start off just by meeting the panel. Me firstly, I've got a games industry background, so I'm 25 years of games development between 1983 and 2008, at which point I set off to do some other things. And I've done everything in that queue, so developer, senior developer, publisher, head of development. And what I do now is I'm a due diligence specialist, so I help investors work out the size and the shape of companies that they're interested in investing in, how they function, what the risks might be, but also what the rewards might be of investing into that team. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask our next panelist, Mario, just to give you a quick summary of who he is and what he does.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Mario Valle. I'm co-founder and partner in Altered Ventures. We are a venture capital firm based in San Francisco that invests in projects that are obviously game-related. A proud investor at PODA. And 20 years in gaming, first entrepreneur, then 11 years at EA, sorry. And then 2 years now as an investor. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Next we've got Teodor.
Hi, I'm Teodor. My background is I've been working as a developer and designer for over 20 years, way back when we did everything on floppy disks. And the last 4 years I've been doing investments. So I moved sort of from being running a studio, a design studio, not a gaming studio, running now VC in Oslo called Snø Ventures. We just announced our new fund for 100 million, which we're going to invest in 6 to 8 companies the next 2 years. And we invest in companies, not titles. So we help them build companies bigger. From early stage and so on.
Thanks very much. On to Dan.
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Thronström. I work at a company called Goodbye Kansas Game Invest based in Stockholm, Sweden. My background is from the developer side as well. I got a bachelor in game design or whatever that means, but also like a hobby coder since I was like probably like 10 and then gone to art school and a few other things. Working in the industry for about 15 years, worked at companies like Grin, Avalanche Studios, Crytek working on Crisis 1 and 2, and Mad Max, and the Hunter series, free to play, and all kinds of things in between. Always worked as a producer, so been managing teams from like 5 people up to 1995. What we do at Goodbye Kansas Game Invest is that we invest in either startups or smaller game companies. We also do it for equity and not project-based. We have done about 12 investments, I think, over the last 2 years. One of them was Experiment 101 with Biomutant that we sold to THQ. And we're now working with Bearded Ladies and Funcom specifically for Mutant Year Zero. That's coming out in December. All over the place. Really, really nice to be here. Really looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Dan. And lastly, on to Ella.
Hi, I'm Ella Romanos. I started out about 10 years ago in industry as a programmer, started my first studio at university. After a few years, ended up running the business slightly accidentally, but then realised I quite liked that side of things. That was a surprise. Ended up now, I still have a couple of indie studios, but I mainly do consultancy, working with developers to help them raise money from grant funding to project funding to equity funding. And more so now, I also work with investment funds, usually in the kind of small amounts, low hundreds of thousands up to the low millions, helping them to find and invest and then manage studios that they fund.
Brilliant. So I'm hoping that we're going to get some good questions from the audience, because that's really what this is about. It's a conversation between the panel and you, not between me and the panel. There's a bunch of things that I thought was a little thought-provoking, so I thought we'd start with a couple of things that I think about quite frequently when I'm dealing with either companies or investors. We're going to try and look at some of the topics that we hopefully will touch on. Kind of what is investment, because we still find people that kind of globally misunderstand what that term actually means. So they think it's about a loss of control or something else, and they don't really see what investment is really about. When I take a look at investors, like they're mythical beasts, right? People are hunting them all the time, but don't necessarily go looking in the right places. They're all around you all of the time. You just maybe don't necessarily recognise that. So we'll hopefully touch on that a little bit. Kind of, what's the purpose? What is the purpose of the investment? You know, what does it really do, and who does it really benefit? So I think I'd like to try and get that one done. What is it that they want? You know, and more importantly, what do they not want? So a lot of rejection, if you like, or a lot of disconnection between teams and investors comes very early because they don't quite see what each other is there for or asking for. So I want to try and make sure that we try and connect that dot, and then hopefully, lastly, we can. The term investor ready is something that industry professionals use a lot. So what does that actually really mean? What would actually make you ready for an investor to come along and give you their hard-earned money, and for that relationship to bloom and blossom and produce the things that it's meant to? So hopefully in the question and answers, we're going to get most of that. Tales from the Riverbank, things that I think about all the time. They come up, even this morning, I've had a couple of people ask me questions which have brought certain thoughts straight back into my head. So these things are just meant to kind of be thought-provoking. So most games don't make money. If you're still hanging on to the idea that things generally sell in huge numbers and it's all like La La Land, it really, really isn't. The harsh truth is that most games don't make money, and that's where this all starts. These investors are about taking risks. You're about creating creativity and creating good games. But in the end, this is about money. And most games don't make money, and it's really important to remember that these guys know that most games don't make money. They're not oblivious to that. You really need to know what the why. Why comes in very quick kind of succession. Why are you doing this? Why this team? Why this game? Why now? Why this amount of money? There's a lot of why coming. And if you don't know the whys, if you can't answer the whys, you're going to struggle. You're really going to struggle with these kinds of people, I think. So it's really important. Investors expect a return. This is not idle kind of activity for them. They're expecting to make some money out of this. So there's a very profound difference between a good game and a commercial one. They're not always the same thing. There are some not very good games that do make a lot of money, right? And there are some very good games, nice programming, nice art, good music, and don't make any money at all. So it's important that we keep that in mind, or we establish that difference. Somebody needs to run the business. One of the conversations I've had this morning, somebody has described themselves to me as the major shareholder, the lead programmer, the interim CFO, and probably the person that sorts the post out. Okay, somebody has to get out of development, get out of the delivery, and start working on it, not in it. And it's a common syndrome, particularly for developers that are bootstrapping and getting themselves going, that everybody has several jobs. But at this level, that needs to start to stop. You need a one-man or one-woman per job kind of attitude towards kind of moving forward. And then friends and family. I know it's good to have people that you know and trust and stuff in the company. It rarely works out well. In the end, one of you is leaving, right? So friends and family is still something that I think about, because a lot of games developers will come along with two close friends or a family member somehow in that mix. So it's never too early to behave like a bigger company. It's never too early to do PR, have an HR kind of advisor, get a proper set of financial input. All those things make you sound and feel a bit bigger. It seems a bit weird that you might have a board meeting when there's only 3 of you, but really you need to have a board meeting. It's about adopting and developing key behaviours going forward. Take the best advice you can afford. So we were talking earlier about a situation with a company called FanDuel. Basically, the founders have created a company worth £500 million and have got nothing because they took poor advice in 2008. So you got to see that the way that it's intended. There are lots of people that can come along, talk to you about a very specific thing, give you good advice, and then go away again. You've just got to go and make sure you're getting the best advice you can afford. So fixate on the numbers. You should measure everything that you can. Everything to do with development, bugs, deployments, customer service, finance. Everything should be measured until you know that it is or isn't having an effect on the way that the business is running. So you really get fixated with the numbers. Sustainable businesses come out from solid decision making, and we tend to think that three of you sitting around the table discussing something is a process. It really isn't. So alongside all of those other things, you now have to be able to defend decisions. So you go to a board meeting, one of these people, and they say, hey, we were expecting X amount of revenue this month. How did that not work out? You need to be ready for that, and that comes from a better set of input in terms of decision making to see where you may or may not have misunderstood something or made a poor decision. So it's about process and procedure. And then the learning never stops. If you ever get to the point where you think you've cracked this, you really, really haven't. You're pretty much doomed at that point if you think that you've overcome everything. It just keeps going. Decisions get kind of bigger and badder and that kind of thing, but it really just keeps going. So if you ever think you've got to the bottom of it, you're really kind of fooling yourself at the very least. So hopefully that's given you some things to think about. In the first instance, I've got a quick set of questions for the panel, and then I'll go to the floor and see if anybody's got anything. So, Mario, what's driving investor interest in the sector overall? So from somebody that potentially didn't know games, what would they have seen or heard or understood that makes them come looking in the first place?
For us specifically, I think that the main difference, and this is a good opportunity to make an advertising here, right? So if you allow me. But I think that the main reason why they are going to look for us specifically is because we're project-based. We don't take any piece of their company. One of the things that we believe is a reality out there is not necessarily that games or most games don't make money. That's true in part, but the reality that we are observing is that there is a huge disconnection between the investor return in a $100+ billion market out there, where about $25,000 million dollars is related to indie games. So what we are very cognizant, or we try to be very cognizant, is that the real problem of the indie development industry is lack of cash. Period. Right? Obviously, there's a need for publishing, there's a need for some knowledge, etc. But mainly the lack of cash is the most important problem that is needed in this industry or this sub-industry. So we're trying to fund the entirety of a project. So we fund from the low $100,000s to up to $1.5 million every project. Everything in terms of platforms except mobile. And I mean, obviously we can get into some more details on how we do it, but mainly I think is because we have 20+ years of experience making games, but we are not publishers. We want you to become your own self-publishing machinery, and we are providing cash. That's it, and support, but it's mostly that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's probably a fair reflection. The most ubiquitous problem for most indie developers is cash flow. It's really kind of, yeah. So, Theodor, what do you think is the right kind of moment in time for a studio to come to somebody like you guys and make that initial kind of, are we talking, is it a time-based thing? Is it a size-based thing? Is it a revenue-based thing? What do you think is that first right moment to come along?
I think it's a combination of them. We in general, because we invest in sort of all tech sectors, and the phase that we enter is sort of usually after you created your product, you are in the market, you have some validation, and then you need sort of help to scale this. So we sort of, our ticket size is 1.5 million and up. So it's when you actually need to build your organization, you want to build your company, you maybe want to go more international. That's sort of the typical phase where we sort of level over sort of network and expertise to help you do exactly that.
Yeah. So in essence, three guys or girls with the right idea. That's not the limitation. It's the opportunity that you're saying is coming along with the right opportunity at the right time, rather than the right size of company at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's why we could be 3 people. You just have to sort of tell yourself also that I need an investor.
Yeah.
And understand why, and then we can help you.
Brilliant. Dan, what do you think investors are turned off by? What's the thing that they just really don't want shoved in front of them?
bad people. No, it's a difficult question because we realize quite quickly when we talk to a lot of studios, and I think that all of us like meet hundreds of studios each year or teams. It is where they are themselves, and they have never been in a situation like this before during the first conversation. So and we were talking about this just a little bit before. We need to coach them about this is how this process is going, and this is what we need to know, and this is what you need to ask us, because it's the first time you go and talk to a publisher. It's the same thing. The worst thing you can ask them is what you want, because you're supposed to pitch to the publisher, right? So in a similar sense, for us, it's not being prepared. It is totally fine to say, I don't have the budget to that detail, but that's completely fine. We can help up with that. But I think it's about knowing your own company, knowing your own vision, because you will get the question. It's like, where do you see yourself now? What do you want to become? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Are you primarily a game developer, or are you an entrepreneur? Do you want to have multiple studios? I mean, I meet studios, they say, like first meeting, it's like, we're going to be one of the biggest studios in Sweden. And that's hard. I mean, both with the King Studio and, DICE, like that's okay, that's going to take a few years to do that. But some of them also just need somewhere to sit. So I think it's a lot about, if you're not prepared, if you're not open, if you're not humble, and if we don't see passion, because that's what we look for. Passion in the team. We're in there for the long term. Even if you have a prototype and it's not super good, but we feel that there's a huge potential in you as a team, that's interesting to continue the discussion. The question of how much money can I get is not going to get you a second meeting.
Yeah, no, I got that completely. So, Ella, when you meet somebody for the first time and they say to you, can you help us raise money, or we'd like to raise money, what's the number one thing that comes into your head? What's the first thing that you think is the most important thing that you say to them following that statement of we want to raise money?
Good question.
Sorry, I gave you the hard question. I'm really sorry.
I know. I think, well, the key thing I'd be looking for is the team. Yeah. And the first question I would probably ask them is, well, quite simple. How much do you want, and what are you going to do with it? And I know that sounds like a really obvious question, but honestly, a lot of people cannot answer it.
Yeah, it's the why again. Why are you doing this? Why now? Why this team? Why this game? It's all the whys again, right? And
often, not only do they not know how much, they don't know when they need it. And that always, I say, well, when do you need it? And someone will say, in a month. And I say, well, do you actually need all that in a month, or do you need it over 3 years? But I think fundamentally, all of those questions are about us judging them. They don't have to have all the answers, but I think I want to see that they're trying to find them. Like I respond very well to people who ask questions, who are trying to learn when they talk to you. So, people who come up and ask questions about how to do it and say, I'm not quite ready yet, can you help me? If they're not, that's the best way to do it, rather than try to pretend, because it's always obvious. Yeah,
I think the important thing for me here is team. So a lot of investors will tell you that a good team can do pretty well with a fairly average idea, but an average team will cock a good idea up really quickly. It's literally that way around. So quite often the investor is fully focused on the team and not on the art or the sound or the game design, because they can judge the team and they can't always judge those other things. And obviously they're investing money into the team, not into the project. So they want that team to be able to function, perform, improve, be self-critical, adjust, adapt, move on. That's kind of what that whole team thing is about. Has anybody got any burning questions? Have we got anybody in the audience that's just... Is there a microphone somewhere? Yeah.
How much money can I have? Here we go.
It would be you.
It would be me. So you've talked a lot about how it's the team. So my question to you is, how can a studio appeal to you when they need the investment to grow the team?
Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, to build the team.
Just a brief comment before, because I think that question is more to the equity guys. The unpopular opinion here. Team is important, yes. Talent in that team, not to manage a company, but to deliver a product, is what I'm looking for. If you're able to, I mean, I wish you the best for your company, for sure, but if you're able to deliver on the promise of a great product, that's enough for me. Specifically, project funding has a problem with publishers, because a lot of publishers, obviously not every publisher, but a lot of publishers all over the world, maybe this doesn't apply here because you're in the heaven of government support, but places where I come from, I'm from Mexico, right? Latin America has a huge problem because you get two ways. One, equity investment from an angel that will take 30% of your company in exchange of $25,000, right? Or you get in touch with a publisher that is going to say to you, don't worry, I know everybody. You don't need money, you just need me, right? And that creates a problem in some regions, and that creates something. That's why we are more focused on projects. Team, again, is important, but not in their direct relation to the company, but in the direct relation to the talent and the delivery capability for that specific product. That was the only comment that I wanted to do. But
Many things about, or if I understood the question correct, is that coming to us is talking about us investing in your company to grow it. So, and that's growth investment. Like, that is something that we see a lot of studios. They maybe publish a game, or they've had a game out there, they're 3 or 4 people. They want to take their company to the next level. And we would call that like a growth investment, is saying like, okay, where do you want to take it? Once again, that means that there's a vision or mission statement that's probably changing, or you're continuing along a path. So you maybe want to be able to take on projects that maybe is 15 people from 5 people. We can do that. That's totally fine. It is more about talking, who are you looking to hire? If it is position-wise, because that's quite a common question. If you have one program, one artist, and then one animator, you're missing a lot of roles. So you probably need to, depending on your talent, have more. And hopefully like 2 of each, depending on the size. But if you're gonna, have a good sized team, you probably might need to be 15, 20, because that's where we're going. We've seen the budgets for a lot of the games, like in general, or also in movies, going up. They need more and more people. And we also see that in indie. It is totally fine to be 2 people if you can make everything excellent like that. But if you want to take on bigger things, you need to have a big organization. So we do that, and I think that a lot of investors don't see it as a problem, because for every talent you take into your company will add value to the company. And for us, from an equity point of view, that's building value, not only for your company, but also for us.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because if you want to grow, how do they assess the team? But it really is, for us, certainly about the leading team, so the founders or the directors. And if we believe in them, and we can see that they've got a valuable recruiting strategy, then that gives faith that they'll hire the right people. If they've got people in mind, that's great. But in some cases, they don't. And I'm sure that you've seen instances where there's companies where somebody at the top has an issue, causes an issue further down. And I think that's the thing. If we believe in those people, then we can believe that they will hire the right people to do the jobs.
But not friends or family.
Yeah.
Because it just becomes impossible. I think the people that come into this and they've got a good technical background, so they can stand there and say, hey, genuinely, I've shipped 15, 20 games in the last 10 years. I'm now looking to do it for myself. That's a slightly early. There's a question there about personal growth. Like, can you grow enough to lead teams of people through complex projects? And that may have not been what you've done previously. You might come along and say, hey, we don't know anything about business, so we've got to find a business guy to be the 3rd or the 4th member of this management team. They're all kind of grown-up things. Like, if somebody comes along and says, I'm brilliant technically, but I have no idea about VAT or tax or anything, that's not an admission of weakness, that's just being a grown-up. And I think most investors will take that, right? It's like, here's a person who can deliver, but needs this other 3rd or 4th component that's going to make this less risky, more secure, more predictable, more reliable. That's just being a grown-up. So I think if you're not business, if you don't understand all those things, it's really not a problem to roll up and say, I can do the technical bit, I just can't do the business bit, or I can only do a bit of the business bit. That's how I see it. That would just be being professional and being a grown-up. Yeah.
I think that's part of being an investor, because when we invest, it's because you're going to grow, and we know that all teams sort of doesn't have all the things they need to grow. So for us, being an investor is not just about the money. It's that what can we sort of give outside of that, of network, of knowledge, of PR and recruiting and so on. So if there's no match there, so I think that if you ask that as the first question, then you are sort of to the next phase.
Sometimes it's just a question of having a mentor in a field that you're not familiar with. So I've raised 13.5 million for my own startups, and I still have a mentor to help me with finance. Now, you would think I would have got the hang of it by now. I just don't have the brain that fixates on it, so I do it begrudgingly, and when I have to, So, I've always had people standing beside me, standing behind me, so that I turn around and say, hey, what's going on here? So all those things are interconnected. If you come along with a good technical background and you just need some business help, you might have found the business help, you might already know who that is, but you've got a weakness in, say, finance. So now we want a non-executive director or a mentor or somebody to stand behind the team and help. That conversation is a very real, live conversation with your potential investors, so that nobody is under any illusion that this is the real deal, the complete team with all functions and assets covered, because it probably isn't, right? That's the thing. Has anybody else got a question? This one.
Yeah. Hi. How do you weigh investment in games versus investment in platforms or frameworks for gaming?
We do only games.
I think that's very, very specific. Every investor is different, where they kind of have their borders. We do have a few edge cases, like IGDB that we've invested in, which is the world's biggest database for games and credits and all that kind of stuff. That is further out. We are primarily investing in games itself, but since the game market and the game developing market itself is growing so rapidly, everything with different mods and tools, supporting both Unreal and Unity, that is the business of itself. I think it's really up to each investor. I mean, I know that you have other tech investments as well, so it might be easier for you. For us, we focus on games because that's where we come from. We've all been working in the gaming industry, so that's what we know. That's also why we're not a publisher or marketing. We have partners doing that because why not use the best? And for us, we, for example, have not done a lot of those technical services surrounding the game development because we really can't help you more with money. And for us, it's so much more than helping you with money. That is usually the first question. It's yes, sure, you can have money. But the biggest question we get is, how can you help us otherwise, to build a company or build a studio or continue with that? And that's our biggest thing that we can give you, except for, some cash. And we haven't really done it to the larger extent because we don't have the in-house competence, to be honest, to do it.
So I would say that in any gold rush, the people that make a lot of money are the people that make picks and shovels. So if you think about the growth and the size of some of the tools companies, they've grown exponentially quicker and more solidly than a lot of the game developers that use those tools. I'm a former tools programmer. Spent 9 years writing level editors and all sorts of stuff. And I know the value of a well-written tool. I can take months out of a schedule if I do my job correctly, and I can add months to it if I'm sloppy. So if you're looking at tools and technologies and enabling technology, it's probably not this group in terms of investors, but there are people out there that understand that stuff. So all you've got to do, you've got a slightly different journey to go with a slightly different set of investors, but it's definitely an investable, fundable thing that you're doing, particularly if you can literally point and say, we think we can take X number of weeks out of any schedule that this tool is applied to, you're always going to have an audience. We would all...
Definitely send us an email then.
Yeah, totally. So I'm just going to ask for a quick show of hands. How many people in the room think that having an investor or bringing VC investment in is something that they would like to look at, pursue, chase? Okay. So is anybody in the room of the opinion that they wouldn't do it even if life depended on it? So we've got one person.
Write that down.
Can we give that person the mic? Is that all right?
Yeah.
So I'm picking on you now. So I want your best explanation of why you would not take VC money.
Well, it has to do with that in this business-oriented world, right? You have to really tailor-make your games to appease certain audiences. And to us that really despise this corporate side of the industry, it's sort of bad. And so my question, I guess, to you guys is, what do you think of secondary jobs for investing in game development as a solution alone?
Like a hobby?
What, so
Like as
funding yourself
as
through
an aspiring
other work.
indie developer. I
So
mean.
funding yourself through other
Yeah.
work. Yeah, I mean, I started out like that. We bootstrapped our first company. I did loads of freelancing, making websites, which I hated, to have enough money to fund like our first games and stuff. So I totally get it. And I think it is a very valid route. That the challenge that we had, and I can't speak for everybody, but the challenge that we had was that switching and focus, switching between things and focusing is really difficult. And we found personally that we did that for about a year, and we found that we were finding it very, very difficult to get anywhere because we were always pulled back to the client work, basically. I know people who have done it successfully, and it certainly is a way to go, but it is a very slow route. And that's not a bad thing, but you're going to have to be very, very patient, and you're going to have to find a way to be able to genuinely focus on your own stuff when you're always being pulled back to the other. I also found it's very difficult to actually make a profit from any small projects like that, so therefore you always have almost no cash to put into the actual projects. But it is doable, but I think it's easy to look at it and think that it's a better and easier way to go. In my experience, it's no easier. It's just different.
Yeah, thanks. I don't really think of it as an easier route at all. But,
Okay,
but
well-
I am really patient, and I...
But I think it's a very, very positive thing. I sometimes refer to it as, let's say that you have a day job, right? If that is working at a retail store or whatever, like no programming or not in the games at all, and then you work 50% and 50% you work on your own game, that is something that I would more call like hobby or moving into indie. I think that's fantastic. I think that is very, very... there's a stigma attached to the hobby. Oh, you know, I'm doing this as a hobby, so you're not really indie or something like that. And it's so stupid because I think that as long as you're working towards releasing your own game, it doesn't matter if you don't have to live on noodles every single day. There's no, for me, the dying artist. I mean, it doesn't have to be like that. So bootstrapping, if you can bootstrap, meaning that you can either, work 50% or work all week and then do your game in the weekend just to fund it that way, do it. That is absolutely the best way. You can go to any course for investors or publisher. That is the best way to do it. We're here as a resource if you want to take the next step and you need that help. But if you can bootstrap, do it.
As we say to whatever startup is that, can you bootstrap as long as possible? That's positive. We have so many that comes in the beginning, have no experience which you are taking on, and say, I have this great idea, but I just give me $1 million and I will quit my job and do it. The market is huge. I said, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah, we used it to essentially build experience that then enabled us to grow in other ways. And if we hadn't done that bootstrapping phase, we came out of uni, we knew nothing really about making games. We thought we did, but and that whole process of going through that was what then enabled us to do other things. So there's no right or wrong way. It just depends what you want, really. And yeah, only take money if you really need it. So
Yeah, I don't think anybody chooses game development to earn money, as everyone here says, so that's not a problem.
So I'm gonna take you up on the comment of corporate. That's kind of bad, right? I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's kind of... So
Yeah, pretty much.
just quantify that a little more. Just explain that a little more.
Well, it is to get funded. You have to have a pretty clear idea of who's going to buy your game. And to appease those certain audiences, you need to take a lot of major creative decisions to appease them. And in that process, you sort of limit yourself in what you're able to create, is what I think, at least.
So going back to the comment I made about the difference between a good game and a commercial one, you're effectively saying that you're prepared to not make money to chase creativity, and somebody that came along to you and said, "Hey, let's do this because we'll make some money." That's the evil bit of this. Is that? Do I understand that correctly?
It sort of ultimately depends on the deal you make, but I don't think you will ever find a deal that doesn't limit you in a major way. I don't think so, at least. If it ever would happen, I would be great to hear it, but...
Can I make you a question on that? Because I have a very quick story, like a
Sure,
20-minute story. No, I'm kidding. Are you alone, or you have a team?
I'm a student. I'm just
Okay,
trying to
so
learn as
I'm
much
going to
as
assume
possible.
that you're looking for this kind of model where you find a way to bootstrap and you work either first alone and then grow from there organically.
Yeah, ideally alone or maximum 4 people.
I think that you have a lot of reason why we started what we started. Let me just very quickly told you that my last job at EA was independent relation development, contact on liaison. And I felt a lot, not only about, students and lone wolves like you right now, but well-developed indie studios felt pretty much the same as you. It's maybe not that kind of like vision on the corporate evil world, et cetera, it's more like, I really doubt that there is something out there that will be fair and that will give me enough freedom of creativity to do my thing, because I'm looking forward to live with, making games, but first I want to fulfill this dream. And the reason why, at least, we were very clear that we didn't want to participate in not even decisions regarding, creativity, but not equity, is because the moment we talk with these studios and say, I like your game, I will not participate in your company, I will fund 100% your game, that's pretty much what happened with Pod, right? I really got in love with that game the moment I played it, and the deal with many other studios that we currently have is we're funding one single project, and then they are able to focus in that project only, in exchange, obviously, to a share of the revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the reaction that I'm getting, even now that we are currently closing an additional conversation, is like, where the fuck were you? Where were you? Because your model is definitely something that is very far from the corporate evil thing. But in all justice, let me tell you that a lot of investors, even they have the different model, are thinking kind of like the same. So depending in if you want to do this for big, and if you want to create a team and etc., I would try to rethink that kind of prejudice, is my opinion.
Yeah.
Just as also a quick comment, since we are the equity-based investors. When we do investments, we do that because we believe in the team. That's who we invest in. We invest in the people. And what we also, it's really important for us, is that we never take control of the companies that we invest in. The founders has always total control of the company, because that's why we invest them, because we believe in their vision and what they're going to do, and we're going to help them. That's why we initially do the investments. So if we didn't believe that, we don't do the investment.
I totally agree with you there. But also, I do hear a lot of it's very similar thoughts talking to a lot of students. And the only thing I can tell you is that corporate will come. You cannot avoid it. Like going back to the hobby thing, if I'm saying I will not rely on a success, I'm just going to do it for my own, for the craft, for the arts, for just for the fun of it, that's fantastic. Then you can do whatever you want. That's totally fine. Until you reach it and you earn money. Just register on Steam, and then suddenly taxes, and corporate taxes, and then there's legal entities, and da-da-da-da. That will happen. Even if you create a game and it just blows up, suddenly you have $10 billion on your account, corporate will come for you. Because you're not allowed to have that much money.
No,
as
you
a private
will create
person.
corporate.
So you have that's the thing. So I think that in another way, embrace corporate and not seeing it as evil because it's your corporation, right? It's you. Suddenly you need someone to help you take care of your accounting or HR or whatever it is. I mean, look at Mojang, look at Minecraft.
Right.
I mean, just read the story and how the corporate did that. I mean, and that how it happens. So don't see it as evil. I actually, even though a lot of people, and maybe I thought that many years back, that publishers are evil or investors are evil. It's simply not true. You need to find, if you want to have a partner with your team or with your company, find the right one for you.
Yeah. Having worked for 2 large corporates, I do take slight issue that it's all evil. You know, there's lots of really positive things about being connected to big companies like Virgin and Viacom. So as a team member representing either of those companies, I would have had a problem that if people thought I was just walking around being evil. What tends to happen is that the nature of corporate life does clash with people that are chasing a lifestyle. So they want to get up late where we want to have a team meeting. They don't want to work on a Friday, whereas we need to work on a Friday. So there's lots of reasons why it comes unstuck. I think individually you make a decision about what is this. These guys are going to ask you, why are you doing this? Now, if you want to win awards, that's perfectly fine. If you want your peers to judge you and give you a statue and say, brilliant, well done, that's perfectly fine. But if you just want money, if you want a big house and a fast car and hot and cold running girlfriends, then that's equally just as fine, right? So you just make a personal decision, position yourself, and then deal with everybody else accordingly, and then don't keep changing your mind because that's confusing. So I've got people that I'm still connected to who are still chasing awards. 20, 25 years after they started, they still don't really have an awful lot of money. They're kind of happy and they're still waiting for somebody to give them a BAFTA or an Oscar because that's what they wanted out of this. And I've got other friends that just chase money and now have everything they wanted in a financial sense. Are they happy? I don't know. But it's just, you know, I think I wouldn't say I had a problem with it, but I don't like the idea that corporate is seen as just kind of negative because I've seen lots of people really benefit from having long-term associations from, you know, quite large companies. So, do we have any other questions?
Thank you.
Where's the microphone gone? I think there was one here and there was one just behind you.
We haven't even started.
You didn't have a question. Well, like,
It got me. Okay.
Sure.
I would like to know what kind of criteria when evaluating the team you look for. What is it you're looking for, and how do you evaluate the team?
So we're running slightly short of time, so just one of you want to just give a quick impression
Should I
of
do
that?
a quick one? First thing in a meeting, I usually just look you in your eye and we would just have a normal conversation. And I am trying to think, can I work with you in 5 years? During those 5 years, without us killing each other. It sounds stupid, but we're working with people and with teams. That is the first criteria, just to meet and see, is that someone who I can discuss with, argue with if that's needed, that will take my input, that I can listen to and be humble in front of, that we can have dinner, have a beer, talk, have fun together as well. It's super important. The other things are pretty much checklist things, which is have a vision, have a budget. If you don't have it, we will help you with that. It's none of us here, I think, is you will send us an email and we will say absolutely not, never, if there's not like a single thing. Like, as you said, you hadn't done mobile yet. We haven't done mobile yet either, simply because we don't feel that we haven't found an opportunity that we can do it and the knowledge for it. So usually it's nothing to do with you. It's that we don't feel comfortable with it. We come from a console background, a PC background. So, but the first thing, the meeting the people, the passion, the talent. We invest in you. I think, and that's super important. We're people.
So we're going to take 2 more questions. We've got one at the front.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they get to the point where they consider getting an investor on board, they've already done the work for hire stuff, and they've kind of tried as long as they can to keep things running without that. And they've also come to a point where they're very possessive of what they've built. They've got a very, very deep connection to what they've built already. So when people kind of have that fear of dealing with investors, I think it's got a lot to do with, well, if we suddenly make a lot of money, then somebody else is going to come and take a cut of that. But I think what's equally important is what's the worst case scenario? What if everything, I mean, you can have the best idea, you can have all the money, everything can still go wrong. And what's the worst case scenario for a company that comes into a partnership with one of you?
I'm going to quickly jump in with this. So as a technical due diligence person, I end up sitting with investors in the back room, having seen the pitch, and we talk about all of that. So Dan's point is we need to feel that on any good day, we don't have a problem. How are these people going to deal with a bad day when nothing is working and nothing is making sense? So Dan's point is you've still got to look at that person and say, if we were stuck in a lift on a bad day, are we going to end up punching each other, or are we going to find a way through this where we'll get a bad day to be an all right day or a good day? The worst thing that can happen is that these guys are in the risk business and that they lose. It's like being in a casino. They've got business models that basically run on a certain level of percentage of failure, and the question is, do you end up in that percentage of failure, or do you not? So there's no real outright negative kind of outcome. You'll part company, you'll be wiser for it. It's a bit like expensive training for them. And then, everybody likes to see somebody bounce back, particularly in America. American VCs love it when you've had a failure and you come back and you can diagnose that failure and explain it and explain why that'll not happen again. You're probably going to make a different cock-up, but you're not going to make the last cock-up again. That they're all kind of syndromes that investors are particularly familiar with. So if anybody was sitting there worrying that somehow they're going to lose their house, or something, that those things don't really exist anymore, it would have been right in a certain period of time, but definitely not now. But the investors are always candid with each other, and as a specialist, they're candid with me about, well, if this doesn't work out, no harm, no foul, we'll kind of move on. But then the investment strategy will reflect that. If they think something's got a slightly higher level of risk in it, the money gets tranched. So it doesn't come across in one go, it will come across in 3 or 4. They'll be looking for some milestones, some safety gates, that kind of thing. But if everybody feels confident about it, then and all the money is required quickly, then all the money will go in quickly. So if anybody's sitting there thinking, I think I'm on the edge of destruction if this goes wrong, it's kind of not really like that. Or I don't think anyway. So
I was just going to say I totally agree with that, because for me the worst case scenario is a relationship where is lack of integrity or something like that. But to lose one investment, to lose in terms of something not going great, in terms of anything business-wise, that's something that even in our case the fund is prepared to. It's a matter of, and to your point, this is a business where person to person is the most important thing in order to start the relationship, at least. So,
I'll tell you what's often worse for an investor is when a team doesn't see success coming and isn't ready for it, and money is just getting left on the table, and the team can't cope, and they don't know who they're going to hire, and they don't know how they've ended up. That's worse, because these guys just watch money just not being picked up. And the number of irate investors that ring and say, what are these guys doing? And I'm like, oh my God, what went wrong? And they're like, no, they've not taken this deal, and this was left, and this didn't happen. And effectively, it's not realizing the potential of it is more probably frustrating than somebody ringing up saying, hey, things aren't going very well, and we're struggling a little bit. That's a bit par for the course, but not picking up those opportunities and running with them is probably more frustrating. Right, we're just going to take one more question from the front, if that's all right.
Yeah, could you talk a bit about what you expect in return for your investment?
I think what I expect in return is pretty different to what an investor in the equity side expects in return. And I will let these guys answer on the equity side. But what we expect in return is the ability to fund one great project that deserves to see the light right? And we usually our model is we get 30% of the revenues, like a publisher. And there are some particularities that, I mean, I'm happy to chat in more detail with you, but in general, what we want to make sure is that the developer has the ability to focus 100% in that project, and that we get from the sales of that project or of that game, we get a piece of that revenue. Hopefully, it's a really good success. And aside of that, if we repeat that process with that specific studio, then we will be able to open a conversation that is equity-based. That's something that we want to, keep the option open. But normally, it's more like if everything went great and we see that maybe it's not going to be repeatable for any reason, it's like, we did it great, thank you, let's repeat that again soon. And that's it. That's my case, but obviously on an equity side, it's different.
Yeah, I think that since we don't connect it to a project specifically, we're looking for a long time, we can invest money and the return of the project or the product that you're working on currently, and we would do investment during that phase. Sometimes we might even say that it doesn't matter if the game doesn't sell like 100,000 units or bring in this amount of money, as long as we build value in your company, which might be that you get more experience, or you release it on consoles, or you went from single player to multiplayer. Of course, we're also in this business, so the goal line is for you to be professional and have this as a career, you need to make money. And that's the same thing for us, because this is our job. So of course, we want to see a multiple of what we invest in. For us in equity, that will take longer time. We realize that. So we might be many projects or many years. For us, there's several ways for us to do that, and it's very much open to different investors. Some will give you money. I would call that more classic VC, and say, bye, and in 5 years, I want to see like 100 times that amount, which is hard. And I think less and less are doing that in the gaming industry. For us, it is more trying to get that back over a longer period of time. It could be that you outgrow us. So our sweet spot is about 500,000 euros for the first investment in the company. But if you have a vision and you want to take your company, and over the couple of years, or 3 or 4 years, you want to have a team of 50 people, and you need more money for that, Goodbye Kansas might not be the one to do that. There's always a bigger shark. And it is our responsibility to help you with that, to reach your goal. So we might have to find another bigger fund or another investor to do that. And in that case, it might be that they have to buy us out. And we will get our money from there, because now the value of your company is bigger. So that's one way to do it. But we just want you to be dedicated in doing your best. And we will try to help you, to empower you to reach that goal. Sooner or later, we hope that we got that money back, or else we wouldn't do the investment. But as we said, this is a risk. We are risk managing. We know that not every single investment that we do will come back, in billions USD. We have the models for that.
Yeah. We're a bit short of time, but Theo, have you guys got anything to add?
Yeah, really quickly, for our fund, in our fund we have our investors again, and if we in our fund time get 5 times back, then we are super happy. Also our investors.
Yeah, I mean, I work a lot with a lot of the tax relief schemes within the UK particularly, so a lot of there is a reduced risk in what the investors are putting in, so obviously they want a return, and usually we're looking at kind of 3 to 5 years is the kind of time that we want to be getting some kind of return, but they invest in a portfolio, so as they said, not every game is going to make money. We hope that one might make loads, a few, and then but I think the percentages that I've seen that people are taking for those kind of monies have got a lot more reasonable in the last couple of years, which I think is great.
So there's a simple thing you just need to talk to yourself about. So if you come along and say, I want 100,000 euros and I'll give you 10% of the company, these guys would ideally want 10 times that return. So 10% of the company at some point has to be worth £1 million. right? Which means the whole company has to be worth £10 million. To get a £10 million valuation, you'd need between 2.8 and 3.2 million pounds of revenue. So the question is, how do I get 3.2 million pounds of revenue? Because you're not salespeople. So if you can't answer that question, if you can't genuinely tell these guys where £3.5 million of revenue is coming from, you can't have your £100,000. It's really that stark and that abrupt. And most investors have some variation on that. Most of them will be happy with 6 or 5 times, and 4 times the money back is an average day. But they would all want 10, and that's where the conversation will start. How are you going to give me, you know, my £1 million back for my £100,000, and therefore where is your 3.5 million pounds of revenue coming from? Does that make sense?
I'm happy with one time my investment.
Can I just,
He's your man, right?
Can I just add one thing? Because I often get asked the question is, well, how am I supposed to prove that, or how am I supposed to show that? And one of the things that we've started saying to developers is, rather than trying to give us a forecast, think about what could success look like. So look at data of other real games and show us, based on assumptions that are reasonable, that you can argue with me why those assumptions are right. What could success be? Because I think we find when we use the word forecasting, people get really scared because they're like, well, I can't promise that. We stop using that word. Think, what could success look like if I do everything right based on what other things that are similar to mine have done? And you can sit there and tell me why your assumptions are correct. That's how you get to the point where we will believe your numbers.
And remember, it's also still a conversation. We're not like correcting your exam or something. If I've had studios say, the worst case for this specific game is us selling 120,000 units. And I'm saying, like, that is not the worst case. The worst case is 0. That is the worst case. And after that, we couldn't continue the discussion anyhow. So, but I think to the best of your ability. And it's up to us. It's our job to talk to you and see,
figure that out.
For that 10%, will this company, with our help, be able to, within a certain amount of period, be able to at least have the potential to get that money back?
Okay, so I want to bring the session to a close. Firstly, I just want to thank you for your patience. It's slightly hot in here, and I know it's been a long day, so thanks for that. I'd like you to thank the panel.
Thank you.
So the subject is a complex one. Come and find us. There's no such thing as a stupid question. So we're around for the next couple of days. Come and jump in front of one of us and say, can we ask the question that we didn't want to ask in front of everybody else? Because we understand that. So come and see us. Ella and I are definitely. Are you guys here for the remainder of the show? So we're all here for the rest of the show. So don't be afraid. Just come and say, hey, can I ask you something? And that might just spark off another conversation. Thanks a lot.